Everybody Hates Rand is a Wheel of Time podcast that will contain spoilers for all 14 books. So if you're anti-spoiler, stop this, read all 14 books, and come back. We'll be here, waiting.
Our title is a joke and is meant to be taken as such. Everybody in this context refers to us and our cats. You are free to feel however you want about Rand. He's a fictional character. Please don't DM us.
The world is a mess, Dark One stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn, the fire's been fanned, but everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
Okay, this is Everybody Hates Rand. It's your friendly neighborhood Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Emily Jushaw.
And I'm Sally Goodger.
And, we're almost done with Crossroads of Twilight.
We are. We
which
have
always manages to sneak up on us.
3 chapters left. We're going to talk about 2 of them today. And then next week it will be the last chapter. And then there's like a little epilogue, I think.
Yeah, that, as usual with Wheel of Time epilogues, isn't very helpful.
Yeah, it's very mostly just really confusing. But this week we are with Matt and the circus. So, just want to give, not necessarily like a content warning, but like Tuon is here and she does say some like egregious things as per usual, especially about like the owning of other human beings. So
Yeah, and the Soldam who are still here also do that.
So just like know that if you're like, I don't want to do that this week.
This is, if you're like, God, I can't wait for an uphill slope from the crevasse. No. The crevasse goes deeper.
The crevasse just keeps
It was an optical
deeper.
illusion. It keeps going into hell. So that's where we're at right now. Not hell. We're still in like the 7th circle or something.
Yeah, we're currently going through Dante's Inferno.
The depths that Robert Jordan will reach are infinite.
Jordan's Inferno.
Jordan's Inferno.
I do not want to talk about these chapters. I'm just gonna get that out in the open.
Okay, why don't I run through the plot summary real quick, and then we'll try and make it more bearable by having more structure.
Okay.
So that it's like when we reach the end of the enclosure,
Okay.
then we can seek enrichment elsewhere. You know.
Okay. I'm happy to talk about them because that is the podcast that we do. I just need everyone to know that I have a bad attitude about it.
We're here.
And
We're not happy
apologize.
about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just run through quick summary, then talk about some, major points of interest.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
Okay.
2 chapters. We're in the circus, obviously still the status quo that we established at the beginning of this book with all of these various groups being at each other's throats is maintained.
Right.
And we get a lot of details about that. The circus is moving at an extremely slow rate because Val and Luca just loves fucking money. Yeah. And also he loves performing, which is an interesting little conflation there that I like about Val and Luca.
Yeah.
He's a multifaceted being.
Yeah.
He loves money, but he also loves the thrill of the stage.
Yeah, the attention.
Anyway, so like every dinky little town they stop at, Lucan's like, we gotta throw the whole circus up and get people in here. Which of course frustrates Matt to no end because he's like, I don't know if you remember, but we have the daughter of the 9 moons hidden away in your caravan, so please don't kill us.
Val and Luca's like, sounds like somebody
Val
else's
and Luca's
problem.
like, you're not paying me enough. And Matt's like, I'm paying you $3 million.
Yeah.
What's enough?
The limit doesn't exist for
the
Val
limit
and Luca.
does not exist. The Aes Sedai are being extremely incautious and going into every town to collect information. They're wearing their cloaks and their hoods and whatnot, but Matt is still like, you guys were in Shanshan territory. Like, you could be recaptured at any moment. And this isn't really terribly important. It just sort of adds to Robert Jordan's overall argument that women are idiots, especially women with power who believe that they're infallible.
Yep.
And it's frustrating because, of course, Teslin and Edicina specifically, who have been made Damon, don't seem to be behaving any differently than Jolene.
Right.
Who at least, does not have the experience, I guess. Every time they go out, they're being followed by the Soldam, who they're still sharing a wagon with. The Soldam are like, we're keeping an eye on them. And we are ready to leash them at any given moment. Just say the word, Matt. And Matt, does not respond well to this by being like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like trying to not piss anyone off.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, balance that he is trying to strike that is not perhaps necessary, but that's maybe one of the things we'll get into. The only funny thing about this is that Matt compares them to like little herds of geese following each other, which is actually a very striking image that I find compelling.
Yeah.
Tom still moping about his letter from Moiraine. Matt's like, what the fuck? Whatever, dude. Don't care. Julian still romancing Thera and attempting to deprogram her by, like, taking her into villages also. Matt is like, from a humane perspective, I endorse it. From a practical perspective, I am so worried that Thera, like, the second someone looks at her sideways is going to just, like, spill our entire story.
Noel is around.
And Noel is just, every once in a while he just pops up directly over Matt's shoulder and is like, hey. And Matt's like, Jesus, God. And Noel's like, do you want me to maybe assassinate the Soldam? And Matt's like, no. And Noel's like, Noel is the Swan Sanche of this arc. He's like, but it would be so much easier.
Yeah. He also vaguely offers to assassinate Thera because she's such a...
He's like, I'll do it. Anyone, I'll do it. And Matt's like, I'm both flattered and terrified, The overarching theme of these two chapters is that Matt begins to court Tuon in earnest. This involves, he, like, goes to their wagon the first time with, like, a very pretty necklace that he spent a lot of money on, because that is, like, what you do when you are trying to tell someone that you are romantically interested in them in this, semi-medieval fantasy world. And Tuon's like, this looks like this looks like a stripper's necklace.
Yeah.
And makes Edgionan wear it, and also tells Edgionan, like, your name is Laelwyn, or whatever the fuck. Get out of my sight. So Edgionan's like, great, that was terrible. Matt is like, okay, clearly that didn't work. So I will attack this problem as though it is a battle, and I need to devise a strategy. Which he does, and of course works very well, because Tuon herself is also very battle-minded. He goes to their wagon every night, plays fantasy chess. He begins bringing these little flowers that are made out of silk, which is actually a very ingenious little gift. So props to Matt. And he gives them to Seleucia initially, ignoring Tuon completely, and then eventually, like, works his way to offering them to her. And they also start taking walks, like, in the nighttime. Matt's like, this is an opportunity to get to know Tuon. But Tuon says the most batshit things every time. It's like Matt's just, like, trying to have a normal first date convo. And Tuon, like, brings up her dead dad.
Yeah.
And Matt's like, okay.
10-4.
My dad raises horses.
Yeah.
I really don't know what to say to that.
Yeah.
Tuon eventually asks Matt to go into town the next time they reach a town, because she wants to buy stuff, materials, so that she can make dresses, because she's mad about the, like, servant clothing that they're wearing. And Matt eventually gives into this. At some point, Edgionan tells him about the marriage ritual in Shanshan that is, people just say, he's my husband or she's my wife 3 times in front of witnesses, and it is confirmed. And you don't have to necessarily do it simultaneously due to arranged marriages that could take place.
Yeah, I believe Tuon has 1 year and 1 day.
1 year and 1 day.
Ceremony.
A very mythological number. But, so Matt is like, oh, this could legitimately happen, then. It's like every time
I know. It's unbelievable. I'm gonna find out who that is and egg their car.
Their motorcycle.
Whatever it
the
is.
hell it is. Just
I'm gonna egg
throw
it.
it right at their face. Once this has been decided, Matt does go into town with Tuon and Seleucia. It's very nerve-wracking for him. On their way, he encounters some ghosts. It's a very interesting little scene. He just is walking and he's like, God, this road is so crowded. I keep having to dodge people. And Tuon's like, what? Are you like breakdancing? What the fuck? And Matt's like, no. And then like looks around and realizes there's no one.
Yeah.
It's a very well done little ghost sequence. They get to town. Seleucia and Tuon are perusing various materials. Matt is sort of just following them around while they window shop. He is, like, looking around and just seeing the various members of his party going past and being like, Jesus, nothing is under my control. No one will listen to me. He realizes that Tuon and Seleucia are no longer in his line of sight. He panics. Classic Matt is like, I just have to rely on my luck, and just closes his eyes and spins in a circle and points. And, of course, that's the store that they're in. So he goes in, is like, we're leaving, just buy what you want. Tuon's like, oh, I love when a man's in charge, blah, 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 or something, I don't know. They get their material, and then they head back to the camp, where they find out that Aegyanan has been stabbed in the back by one of the Soldam, Rena, who then booked it out of the circus. Teslin's, like, manages to save Aegyanan's life with healing, but Matt is like, after consulting with the Red Arms, his soldiers, is like, okay, there's a very distinct chance that Rena could actually, like, make it to the next town back and seek help, or, like, alert the Shanshan authorities to what's going on, so we have to prepare to go into hiding. So he's like, Luca, pack up and go, and everyone else just separate from Luca. You know, we're ready at a moment's notice. And he himself goes after Rena with the other Red Arms, and they catch up to Vannon? Yeah, they catch up to Vannon, who's, like, on her trail. And they, like, make it to where she's, like, across a river, and it's, like, on the other side of the ridge is where she needs to get. So Matt orders his guys to shoot her and kill her. Which is what happens. Matt's obviously very torn up about it, because that's Robert Jordan's whole project. And then they turn around, go back, and find out that nothing has changed in the circus except that Tuon has made nice with Luca and has offered him, like, official protection. And, like, so basically everyone has, like, diplomatic immunity except for Matt and I assume the rest of his coterie.
Yeah.
So at least Luca no longer has to worry, I guess, that the whole circus is going to get burnt down or whatever. But this is clearly just part of Tuon's game.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that's all the major plot points.
Yeah, this is not as major, but the reason Aegyanan gets stabbed is because she's one of the few people who know that Soldam can channel.
Yes, that is interesting, because I'd forgotten that Aegyanan had, for reasons unknown, kept that to herself.
Yeah.
Instead of immediately being like, here is the blackmail that I hold over these people.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like something you would share, but as we have said before, no one in this little group is terribly competent or good at collaborating.
Yeah, no one's very forthcoming. They're all quite weaselly.
Yeah, I'm not saying Aegyanan deserved to be stabbed in the back.
Of course not.
But, like, you're sort of setting yourself up for failure when you are, like, apparently the single person with this piece of information. The second you got into this camp, you should have been like, Matt, Tom, everyone, gather around, here's the secret. Let them know you know the secret.
Yeah.
Then they're stuck, you know?
Yeah. They can't go. There's not just one person you take out. Whatever. Yeah. Anyway. That's those chapters. So, let's run through a few things. These chapters revolve around Matt having to have Rena killed, which he feels terribly guilty about, and which we have talked at length about why that is a silly thing that Robert Jordan has omnipresent in the plot.
It's particularly frustrating here because it's Matt. Matt hasn't traditionally been one of our bigger culprits in this sort of tangled mess of misogyny. But he is dealing with a lot of lingering guilt from Tylen's death.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating because I do think it's very natural that he would feel guilty about Tylen's death. Unlike with Rand treating his female soldiers differently than his male soldiers, you know?
Yeah.
It is genuinely upsetting that Matt has had his only two significant sexual partners are women who have died. Either because he killed them or they got killed because of him.
Yeah.
That would be genuinely upsetting. Which is not to excuse the ongoing project. I do think it's pretty funny how Matt says, like, okay, that's 3 women I've killed or had killed. Never again. If I die for it, never again. And they all say something. They all say something like that at some point. And I'm just, like, super mad that, like, promises, Robert Jordan. One of them should have died.
Yeah.
Refusing to kill a woman. This is just such an empty threat.
Yeah.
Just a Damocles sword that is not hanging by a thread. It's hanging by your plot armor.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, man. Stop being like it's a big fucking deal if it's not gonna be a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
We just still have the ongoing problem of Matt being unable to manage all these groups of people. This is partly because he does not have the information, like why the Soldam are there, needed to manage them, but he is also just like, I have to, for some reason, keep the Aes Sedai happy and the Soldam happy, but I have placed them in a situation where it is impossible for them to be happy because they're constantly interacting with each other.
Right.
And he's just like, this is a huge problem that these women are foisting upon me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, buddy, it's like he's, you know, crafted a fish tank with like a bunch of piranha and some goldfish, you know, and he's like, these damn goldfish just keep acting up.
Yeah.
It's like, pal, what do you want?
I know, and it's just like such an easy solution. Just like at the very least, don't make them sleep in the same wagon.
Yeah, separate them. I found myself reading and being like, before I remembered that Matt didn't even know about the Soldam, I was like, he has the fucking leashes, just like, you know, chain them up in their wagon so the Soldam at least can't leave.
Yeah.
You know, and then I was like, oh, well, that's inhumane too, you know?
Yeah.
How is that helping the situation at all? There's an interesting balance here, as with the figure of Thera, where we're trying to do some sort of, like, redemptive work here, or not redemptive, I can't think of the word. We're trying to be, productive in the ways that we are going about this situation, but, like, then you're making all sorts of compromises that are unproductive and unethical.
Yeah,
And
like
it didn't sit out very well.
we've been talking a lot, especially in this book, I think in particular, about frameworks of justice. And we've been talking about how, like, restorative justice cannot exist in the Wheel of Time world because there's just some sort of, like, molecular issues built in that would not make that the case. And, like, though I would not say that, obviously, Thera does not need to be, like, justice is not quite the right word because she has not done anything wrong. She is herself the victim. The Soldam have participated actively in many, many, many crimes. But still with Thera, I think, like, a restorative framework is kind of interesting because it would be very easy to punish this person for what happened to them and punish them for what they could do. You know, sort of a, like, preemptive punishing of sort of, like, locking her in a wagon, you know? And the Soldam, again, justice is not, like, quite the right term here because I don't think any of them would necessarily admit to having done anything wrong. But it is still interesting to be Matt kind of seeing his decision-making and the decision-making of the circus function in a way that is a bit more restorative rather than punitive. And I think, unfortunately, Robert Jordan is offering up the thesis that these are not plausible forms of treating people because ultimately the Soldam Rena betrays them. Thera is fine as far as I
Yeah, I think Sarah has a lovely little
Yeah.
mini arc
Yeah.
where she just slowly builds up her backbone again.
Yeah, builds up her confidence and sort of heals. So, like, but again, Thera doesn't exactly quite exist in this because, again, she has not committed any crimes. She's just sort of, like, adjacent to this framework. But it's unfortunate that, like, Robert Jordan is not allowing the full project of being like, we're not going to necessarily punish them or lock them up. We are going to attempt to integrate them into our community. He's like, do you see the fundamental issues here? You know?
Yeah. I do think one thing he's also doing is being like setting up the Soldam to fail in order to paint Tuon in a better light.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, he's being like, okay, Matt is fundamentally treating these, you know, Tuon's wagon and the Aes Sedai Soldam wagon the same, you know? He's giving them a lot of leeway.
Yeah.
He does have more of a vested personal interest in what's going on with Tuon, but, like, ultimately he could be stepping in a lot more with the Aes Sedai and the Soldam, and he's not. And what happens is that the Soldam, inevitably, Rena runs off after almost killing a Giannin, blah, 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 blah. But Tuon is, like, sticks to her word and is not going to betray them and da-da-da-da-da because she's just, like, so... She keeps her promises. Blah, 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 blah. So it's almost like we're being set up to this, like, look... These both come from the Shanshan, but there are still fundamental character meaning, like, your character, differences. Rena's a weasel, but Tuon is a good person, even though she is part of this systemic framework of evil.
No, Emily, that is such a good point, and it does kind of go back a little bit also to what we were talking about last week about this sort of, like, in fantasy, the fundamental nature of good and evil. Like, it comes down more apparently to your character than necessarily the, and of course your character is a big part of the choices that you make, but Robert Jordan is presenting that Tuon can be a good person making good choices while still existing inside this evil system, and that is not how that works.
Yeah, like, yeah.
But you're so right. There's sort of this, like, foil for Tuon for us to be like, what a steadfast person.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. It's just, like, unfortunate that it's just this, like, tangle, and Matt is not taking, like, there's not good options. You know, locking the Soldam up is not a good option. That's not a humane option, like you keep saying. But it's like, Matt is too busy courting his imperialist piece of shit wife to apparently do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, about, like, so, what priorities do you have? Like, on that line, much of these 2 chapters is doing this whole courting sequence with Matt and Tuon. As with everything with Matt and Tuon, it is very, like, mythologically driven.
Yeah.
Matt has to go through these sort of intricate rituals and, like, gift giving and almost, like, quest going to find these rare gifts, like unto, you know, people who are going after a princess or something. You know, they'll be set these impossible tasks that, of course, they will inevitably prove possible and thus prove themselves worthy.
Yes.
At the same time, what we're doing is having Tuon set up as marriage material for Matt. And that is done by subtly but frequently comparing her to other women Matt has dated. Or, I don't know if dated is the right term, but been with. For example, Tuon doesn't react to the jewelry the way Matt thinks she will. She basically calls it slutty. She is very serious. She doesn't react to Matt's flirting the way he normally thinks that women should. He has this big dilemma when he gets to play stones with her about whether he should let her win or whether he should try actually to win himself. And he's like, it's just so difficult to know because women are all so complicated. They might throw a tantrum if they lose, or they might throw a tantrum if you let them win, and It's impossible to predict. And then it's like Tuon just takes the game seriously and wants to win.
Play, yeah.
Yeah. And so we've had these sort of like pick-me girls in the Wheel of Time before. Min is the best example of that because she's the not like the other girls girl. But Tuon also, in her way, is a not like the other girls girl because she is the polar opposite of everything Matt has experienced and notably enjoyed in women in the past.
Yeah.
So what Robert Jordan is doing is managing to insult all of the women who Matt has been with, basically calling them, like, idiot sluts.
Yeah.
You know, these are just stupid women who will react to this man giving them jewelry or whatever. Like, nobody, like, people don't like getting jewelry. Come on. It's not stupid to like jewelry or to like a man giving you flowers or paying attention to you or flirting with you. Like, God, could you just let women exist for 1 minute? Could you stop telling them, women, there's a right way to be a woman, and no matter what you do, you're not doing it.
Totally. And like, it's such a... You have such good points this episode. I, like, legitimately despise the term marriage material. You know, like, it is so, like, despicably fucked up to be like, this person is marriage material and this person isn't. Because what Robert Jordan is basically doing is, like, playing with the Madonna whore complex right now, you know? Because, like, Tuon is serious and chaste and logical, whereas everyone else Matt has dated is flippant, slutty, and entirely emotional. And so it's just like, Tuon is, you're right, the quote-unquote right type of woman that Matt just sort of had to get to in order to be a marriage material type of guy himself. He just had to sort of get through this sea of despicable women in order to get to the one good one.
Yeah, and almost like he had to get out all of his, like, more primal, lusty desires on these whore women before he could actually consider, like, monogamy with, which is the attitude that men are given.
Yeah, totally. Everyone's like, play the field a little bit before you settle down, as though women are themselves a game.
Yeah, women are expected to somehow be virgins when they marry. Yeah. Men are expected to be wildly experienced sexually.
Yeah.
Before they marry. And it's like, those two things can't coexist. Do you understand? Like, either everyone's a virgin when they get married, or no one is.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously there's a better option there. But,
yeah, but you're right. It's just these, like, extreme, like, logical fallacies in the way that men and women are supposed to interact, particularly with the way that women are supposed to be. You know, there's just, like, this set of contradictions to be a woman. And Tuon is just sort of, like, embodying all of this shit for Robert Jordan. And I also want to say that I do think it is sort of, like, if I can remove myself, like, objectively interesting that Matt is not attracted to Tuon at first, and sort of the attraction develops over time. That is an interesting thing to see portrayed in a series that is sort of like Elaine falling in love with Rand immediately because he's so beautiful or whatever. I also think it is interesting that they sort of have, like, a very intellectual relationship, like them sitting there playing chess is really interesting for two smart people. I think it is really, really gross that Matt still at this point has comments about how Tuon is not his usual type or something, you know, as though it is, like, bad to be sexually or physically attracted to your partner if you are also intellectually attracted to them.
Yeah.
It's just like this, it's this weird thing, and I wish he could just be like, I am very attracted to Tuon in multiple. I don't think he should be. I think she stinks, but if he could just be like, I saw this really interesting thing about, like, purity culture, where this person who's a sex therapist was like, so many of my clients are really distrustful of people who are attracted to them physically or sexually because they think that person doesn't respect them. Because we're sort of taught fundamentally that people who respect you as a person will not want to have sex with you in a purity culture that is supposed to be, you know, only for marriage. So there's this, like, weird thing happening where he's not allowed to sort of, like, see her as an intellectual person and also be just, like, sexually attracted to her.
Yeah, what Robert Jordan is doing is insulting everyone involved, not just Matt's prior partners, but Matt himself, by implying that Matt himself is not, like, worthy of being a husband if he does not first come to respect Tuon as a person and intellectually before he's sexually attracted to her, as though, those two things can't coexist. Or you can't be sexually attracted to someone before you get to know them.
Yeah, like
that's actually the order that usually goes in.
Yeah, like the human brain is an animal brain. And it is just like fundamentally not bad to be sexually attracted to somebody. It is not a moral statement at all.
Unfortunately, Robert Jordan has set it up to be bad if Matt is sexually attracted to Tuon, because most of his descriptions physically of Tuon have been that looks like a child.
Oh, you're so right. That is such a good point.
We'd be like, wow, Matt's a massive creep, if the first time he saw this woman who he assumed was a child, he was like, damn,
Yeah.
That's very creepy, but like, that was a choice you made, Robert Jordan. You did not have to make Tuon, just because she's bald and slim-figured, look like a child. In my experience, women who are bald and slim-figured look like gay men.
Yeah.
Not children, you know? Or they just look like bald, slim-figured women. Like, there is more nuance to, like, the adult versus child face and body than that. It's just, it's wild. But, so there's absolutely no way for anyone to win in this situation.
You're so right. It's a trap.
And I agree with you. It is incredibly interesting when you're able to divorce yourself from this situation, like Matt and Tuon's ongoing relationship, because it is interesting to see these two people have a relationship that seems to be built upon mutual, like, curiosity.
Yeah.
And eventual respect, and a lot of, like, intellectual interest in each other. That's not something we've seen with literally any of our other main romances.
Yeah.
And it's especially interesting that it's being given to Matt, who's constantly written off as this idiot.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that Tuon herself writes him off as an idiot, and then he's able to surprise her by being like, I'm actually incredibly good at chess.
Right.
And I'm actually incredibly good at a lot of things. Like, you imagine being in Tuon's scenario, not knowing Matt well, seeing him take charge of the situation after Edgianen's been stabbed. Like, at that moment, she was probably like, oh, he's actually, like, very good at what he does.
Right.
And that's interesting to watch. But, it's difficult to be like, Matt and Tuon have a relationship built on intellectual equality without being like, well, they're on equal terms of stupidity.
Yeah.
Because if they were actually intellectual equals, they'd be able to challenge each other.
Mm-hmm.
Including Matt being able to challenge Tuon on the system that she's a part of.
Yeah.
Like, that's sort of, a good relationship is built on your capacity to argue, in a way.
Yeah.
Relationships last if you are able to have conflict and then get through the conflict,
Totally.
Matt should be able, and obviously we're saying Matt should be able to do this because we know that Matt is, insofar as he has any interest in the Shanshin situation, Matt understands that it's inhumane.
Yeah.
Or should. And Tuon doesn't, so it should be Matt challenging her.
Yeah.
And Robert Jordan is sort of, like, leaving it open-ended as to, like, that will maybe one day happen. They just have to build up all this mutual equality and trust and respect first. And I'm like, Robert Jordan, you wrote a 14-book series, and you're telling me you don't have time?
Yeah.
You don't have time in the wheel of time?
Tuon could have been introduced earlier. The Shanshin invade in book 2.
Yeah.
Tuon could be introduced earlier. Matt could meet her earlier. They could have a much longer relationship. And by this point, Tuon could be totally on board with dismantling her own empire.
Yeah, that would be sick.
That is something that could totally happen. And then maybe she would be an interesting character. But as it stands right now, in book 10, I always have to remind myself what number this is. I am really... I admit I also have some, like, personal stuff in this game where it's, like, very hard to talk to someone who doesn't recognize that other human beings have intrinsic value. This is something that happens a lot everywhere around the world, but has been, like, really tough, especially in America. Speaking from my own experience, sort of post the 2016 election, trying to talk to people who voted for Donald Trump, knowing that he was a rapist and a racist and a huge bigoted piece of shit. It's like, how can I consider myself equals with this person in any way when they are denying the equality of many, many other people around us, you know? So
Yeah.
I just, like, find it really hard to be like, Matt and Tuon have an intellectual relationship as intellectual equals, but she, like, I'm not explaining myself very well, but it's just like, how can you, as Matt, sit here and be like, I consider this woman my intellectual equal, when she refuses to see other people as human beings? And I'm not saying Matt should think that Tuon is less intelligent. Obviously, she's a very intelligent woman, and, like, your politics don't necessarily have a bearing on your intelligence, but to a certain extent, there's, like, an emotional intelligence involved there, and, like, I just don't understand how he can engage with this, and how Robert Jordan is like, they're supposed to be equals in so many ways, but there's just this, like, fundamental part of their relationship that, like, makes it so equality can truly never happen.
Yeah, it occurs to me that there's, like, what we're seeing here is intellectual equality, but a complete moral mismatch. And it's like, you're so right, especially about post-2016 about post-2016 American people. Like, I've had to struggle so hard with being like, people that I know and have grown up with and respect, for example, my parents, how do I continue to have relationships with them when I'm seeing a fundamental disconnect in the way that we view the world?
Yeah.
And do I dismiss that by being like, it turns out that my parents were idiots all along,
Yeah.
you know, or my parents have been slowly becoming idiots in their aged,
Yeah.
you know, they're in their 50s, that's a joke. But I'm having to be like, we're all still the same intellectual people that we've always been, but there is a fundamental difference in our morality systems. My parents' morality is highly dependent upon their religion, which has its own issues. So, therefore, we are incompatible at this point. And what we're seeing here with Matt and Tuon is that Robert Jordan is positing that intellectual equality and sexual attraction eventually is much more relevant than a moral compatibility, as though that's something you can get over. That is, like, literally one of the top things you cannot get over in a relationship.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying and bringing in some better words. Like, I don't want to posit the argument that people who, like, would vote for Donald Trump or support fascism are dumb people, because that is not correct, and is also just, like, ultimately really bad, you know? It just, like, really paints the world in, like, very black and white terms, and doesn't allow for very much, like, bridge building across party lines or politics. You know, I don't want to posit that. It also, like, really simplifies a very complicated problem. So I apologize for my misspeaking there. I'm just, like, wasn't really sure how to articulate it. And I think morality is, like, the right term. It's like having a friend who would, like, sleep with a cop, you know, and being like, well, he's such a nice guy, and it's like, he's a cop, you know?
Yeah.
There's just, like, this, yeah, I think morality or, like, ethics is perhaps a bigger issue than intellect. It just, like, frustrates me that Robert Jordan wants us to understand Matt and Tuon as intellectual equals, and equals in so many ways, when there's just this, like, fundamental misunderstanding of the world between them. And I do not understand how Matt can be like, this person considers me their equal, when, like, I would not want to be in a situation where somebody like Tuon considered me her equal.
Yeah, I'd be like, ugh.
Because I'd be
What's
like,
that say about me?
what does that say about me, and what does that say about the actions that I am taking in the world, that she would consider me as a potential partner for herself? So I think ultimately I'm just, like, once again very upset about Matt's sort of character assassination throughout this arc, of being like, ultimately, I mean, this is something that's very close to home, and perhaps that's where this sort of this Matt-shaped wound inside of me is coming from, is just like, oh, what was I saying? You guys. I don't know what I was saying. I had a really good point and I lost it. I'm really sorry. But, yeah, it's just really, I think it was going back to this idea you were talking about. Like, it's very difficult to see people that you respect throw their morality out the window for whatever reason, or just ultimately discover that their morality is shakier than you thought it was. Like, we've always thought of Matt as sort of the people's character, and to discover that he will not ultimately side with the people, he will ultimately side with the system, is really upsetting, and I feel quite betrayed by it.
Yeah, Matt is like this dude who walks in and you're like, oh, how'd you vote? And he's like, I didn't vote. And
Yeah.
you're like, what?
Yeah.
What? How's that? How are you that person? Like,
Yeah.
and also, how have you disguised yourself from me not knowing that you were that person, you know? And it's like, I also don't want to get black and white about morality because I think the fundamental issue, both in this country and in this book, is that there are things that are bad and there are things that are good. And Tuon is doing bad things, and Matt supposedly is a champion of good things.
Yeah.
In the same instance, when we take an objective step back, one hopes and looks at the division in America after the 2016 election, we see good things and bad things, and people supporting good things and people supporting bad things.
Yeah.
What's incredibly difficult is that both the people supporting bad things and good things understand themselves to be good people.
Yeah.
Morality is such a fluid... No, that's not true. Morality is a pretty black and white thing, but because it's so black and white, people have to jumble it around and jumble themselves around in order to maintain the worldview that they're good people.
Right.
Because no one is, like, wants to understand themselves as a bad person, including Tuon.
You're so right, Emily. Yes.
So Tuon believes that she is a good person. And what's problematic is that Robert Jordan also seems to believe that Tuon is a good person.
Yes.
So this is not a journey of two people understanding, like, of deprogramming Tuon from the ways that she has had to shape her world in order to understand her position in it. This is a story about Matt and Tuon just reaching the level together, you know?
Yeah.
So, sucks.
It really is just really rancid, and thanks for playing in that space with me, guys. I still feel like I was a little jumbled, but the question of how do you interact with people, I mean, this is not a relevant question for Matt because apparently he doesn't care about Tuon having, like, starkly different politics than what he allegedly is supposed to have. But, like, how do you interact with people who have, like, it could be a really interesting project if there was no romance involved, seeing, like, Matt and Tuon sort of engage with one another with these, like, wildly different worldviews would perhaps be very interesting, but romance just complicates things, and Matt's sort of capitulation to her constantly, it's just hard. Again, I feel like I said some perhaps not the best things about intelligence and morality, so I apologize for trying to reduce a complicated thing down to an analysis for Wheel of Time, but...
No, this isn't a scripted podcast. Inevitably, to get to the point, we're going to have to...
talk
through things.
Get there. Yeah, You're right. Thank you guys for playing in that space with us, and for our non-American listeners, thank you for...
They know.
Yeah, you're right, but just, like, thank you for, always allowing the American comparison, because it sure probably gets a little old at some point. Anyway, Matt and Tuon are there.
Matt and Tuon are there, and that's how we end Crossroads of Twilight. Still with the circus. I kind of was like, yeah, I'm ready for them to leave the circus, you know?
They're in the circus for still quite a while.
Yeah, but they are going to be in the circus for quite a while, so R.I.P. to Val and Luca, I guess.
I mean, Matt could have just fallen in love with Val and Luca.
You're so right.
Like, how funny would that be for Matt to be in love with Nine's quasi-ex?
And Luca's like, where are you from?
And he's like, the Two Rivers.
And he's like, oh my god, do you know?
Do you know?
Matt's like, we're breaking up.
And do you know this intense woman who's sort of always yelling at people?
Matt's like, no!
I do know her. She was my childhood babysitter.
Robert Jordan had so many missed opportunities for actual comedy.
I know. It would be so funny. Imagine the family reunion. Nynaeve now married to Lan, the worst man you know. Matt now married to Val and Luca, also the worst man you know.
But in totally different ways.
Rand and his 3 wives. Perrin and the Basheres.
Keeping up with the Basheres.
Keeping up with the Basheres. Beeping up with the Basheres.
Thanks for coming up with the title of this episode in the last minute and a half. We needed one. Beeping up with the Basheres. Stupid. Okay, you guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for playing in the space with us. Thanks to Glenna Mackenzie for our theme song, to our followers on social media, and our patrons on Patreon. And when we're back next week, we will be wrapping up Crossroads of Twilight. Then, as usual, there will be a bye week before we...
And we'll just sort of throw it out the window for
Yeah.
the motorcycle guy.
Do you have a sign-off?
Yeah, this is, I've already told you this, so sorry, and it's not very exciting, but my company, instead of doing, like, an employee appreciation week, does something called Connection Week, where we are supposed to, like, connect with one another. I got an email from the HR guy who was like, please block off this time on your schedule because we're going to be taking all of you to a local buffet. And, like, for reference, my company has, like, over 200 people. So I was like, can someone just, like, for my own anxiety, tell me if you've, like, reserved the buffet, or are we just gonna roll in? I will not be in attendance.
No.
Not because I necessarily have anything against buffets. I can fuck with a buffet, but it's, like, a lot of unmasked people around a lot of potentially contaminated food.
Yeah.
But you're just gonna, like, drop 200 people on this poor unsuspecting business. Shut down the business.
Yeah,
start
what
a
if they
sovereign
didn't
nation.
schedule anything? They just roll up in the buses.
Yeah.
Their little school buses. They're like, here we are with your next 200 customers.
Like,
Jesus, there
can a
won't
buffet
be
even, like...
any good pieces of cake left. You know? It'll all just get wiped out.
I know.
Christ.
Anyway, think about that when you get sad. 200 government employees.
Yeah, whatever you do, people, don't go to a workplace party at a buffet. Spoken by someone who went to a workplace party at a buffet. I was forced to. It was not of my own volition.
Yeah.
So just know that that's where bad things happen. Okay, everyone. Happy
Happy Halloween!
Happy October. Goodbye.
Me.